A'ja Wilson. My God, you see how many free throws that lady have?
I am in shock.
Oh my God, on the stat sheet, she had basically 30 points.
What happens when the so-called unbeatable dynasty gets humiliated by the team they've crushed for nearly a decade? And what if I told you it happened without Caitlin Clark on the floor?
This was a big win for the Fever because the Aces were the only team that they had not won at least one game to last season.
The Las Vegas Aces, reigning champs, loaded with MVPs, hyped as unstoppable, just got embarrassed in front of the entire basketball world.
And Caitlin Clark loved it.
A 27-point blowout, fans stunned, refs scrambling, and the biggest irony, even with all the whistles and favoritism, it still wasn't enough. This isn't just another regular season game. This is the moment the Indiana Fever flipped the script and exposed cracks in the Aces' so-called dynasty.
The third. Like I said, the referees were starting to get on the side of the Aces.
For almost 9 years, the Indiana Fever couldn't touch the Las Vegas Aces. 16 straight losses. Game after game, the same painful story. And every time, the Aces looked unbeatable, stacked roster, MVP-level talent. The dynasty that never ends until now.
The Indiana Fever just beat the Aces. The first win for the Indiana Fever against the Las Vegas Aces since I was 22 years old.
On a night where everyone expected the Fever to roll over, especially with Caitlin Clark sidelined. They didn't just show up, they sent a message. Final score, 81-54. That's not just a win, that's an annihilation.
Defense is playing phenomenal. Oh my God, it's night and day. I think that Commissioner's Cup gave him swag.
This wasn't some last-second buzzer beater or a lucky break. The Fever dominated from the opening tip, built the lead, and never let go. For the Aces, the team that's supposed to be the standard, it was a complete collapse on national display. But how did the underdogs flip the script? And why did the Aces, loaded with star power, fall apart so badly? It gets even crazier when you look at what actually happened on the floor. The Las Vegas Aces didn't just lose this game, they got exposed. Their so-called star power, it looked real on paper, but when the lights came on, the truth was impossible to ignore. A'ja Wilson dropped 29 points. Sounds impressive until you realize most of that came from the free throw line. The officials practically handed her a lifeline all night, but even with the favorable whistle, it didn't matter. Her performance was empty calories, good stats, no real impact. And the rest of the team? An absolute disaster. 7 for 43 shooting. 16% from the field outside of A'ja Wilson. Single digits across the board. Chelsea Gray, supposedly the veteran leader, finished with just 2 points, 5 turnovers, and looked completely lost on the floor. This was the team that was supposed to be unbeatable. The dynasty. The blueprint for success. The Aces didn't just lose a game, they lost their identity. Meanwhile, the Indiana Fever were just getting started, and their defense was about to turn this into a complete humiliation. For years, the Indiana Fever were treated like a joke, a team stuck in rebuild mode. Easy wins for the league's elite. But what happened against the Aces? That wasn't luck. That wasn't a fluke. That was the kind of defensive clinic you usually only see from championship teams. The Fever held Las Vegas to just 26% shooting, their worst offensive performance of the season. Every possession was a struggle. Passing lanes closed. Driving lanes disappeared. The Aces, a team built on pace, ball movement, and big plays, looked completely rattled. Indiana forced 17 turnovers, controlled the paint with a 38-20 advantage, and shut down every secondary option the Aces tried to lean on. Natasha Howard looked like a different player, aggressive, locked in, fearless. Aaliyah Boston, dominating both ends of the floor. The rookies, playing like veterans, with nothing to lose. This wasn't the same Fever team the Aces had steamrolled for nearly a decade. They've leveled up, and that suffocating defense was just the beginning. But even with all that dominance, the night still had its fair share of controversy, and A'ja Wilson was right in the middle of it. Just when it looked like the Aces couldn't catch a break, the referee stepped in, and suddenly, the game took a familiar turn. Lexi Hull, one of the hardest working players on the floor, boxes out perfectly. Textbook fundamentals, clean positioning, secures the rebound exactly how it's drawn up. But here comes A'ja Wilson, reaching over from behind, grabbing over the top. That should have been an automatic over-the-back foul. Everyone in the building saw it. Instead, the refs called a jump ball. That wasn't just a bad call. That was a lifeline. A chance to slow down the Fever's momentum. A chance to tilt the game in favor of the so-called dynasty. And the timing? Convenient, to say the least. It wasn't the first time A'ja Wilson got a favorable whistle that night, and it definitely wasn't the last. That's why some fans have a new nickname for her, Whistle Wilson. When the game gets tight, the refs know where the bailout's going. But here's the difference now. The Fever didn't flinch. They didn't fold under the pressure, even when the calls started piling up against them. And while the Aces leaned on the officials to stay afloat, the Fever leaned on each other. And the next few minutes would flip the entire game on its head. By the time the third quarter hit, you could feel the tension boiling over, not just on the floor, but on the sidelines too. The refs had already made a series of questionable calls. Momentum was shifting, and Fever head coach Stephanie White had seen enough. With just over 5 minutes left in the third, White finally snapped. The missed over-the-back foul, the constant whistles for the Aces, the clear bias, it all reached a breaking point. She erupted on the sideline, laying into the officials, her frustration impossible to hide. The result? A technical foul. The refs tried to send a message, but all they really did was pour gasoline on the fire. And Caitlin Clark? Even injured, sidelined in street clothes. She couldn't hide her excitement. Cameras caught her smiling, clapping, fired up as her coach went to war for the team. That's leadership. That's unity. While the Aces were unraveling, pointing fingers, and relying on whistles to keep them alive, the Fever were building chemistry, fueled by frustration, bound by resilience. And the Aces? They were about to completely fall apart. Because what happened next in the fourth quarter wasn't just a loss. It was a total collapse. The fourth quarter wasn't basketball. It was a demolition. The Las Vegas Aces, this so-called dynasty, managed just 7 points in the entire quarter. 7. For a team built on offense, stacked with talent, that number isn't just bad, it's embarrassing. Meanwhile, the Fever smelled blood and never let up. They out-hustled, outshot, and completely overwhelmed the defending champs. Kelsey Mitchell, unstoppable. Aaliyah Boston, dominating the paint. Natasha Howard, crushing the boards and enforcing her will. Every time the Aces tried to rally, the Fever shut it down. Ball movement, defensive rotations, perfectly timed switches. The Fever looked like the veteran team. The Aces looked lost, frustrated, defeated. It wasn't even close. The final score of 81-54 doesn't tell the whole story, because what the Fever did was bigger than one win. They didn't just beat the Aces, they exposed them. Every weakness, every chemistry issue, every over-reliance on A'ja Wilson's individual brilliance was laid bare. And here's the worst part for Vegas. Their MVP, A'ja Wilson, had a so-called great night with 29 points, and it still wasn't even close. The rest of her team completely vanished. The numbers behind this meltdown are brutal, and they reveal exactly why the Aces might not be the unbeatable force everyone thought they were. If you looked at the box score without context, you'd think A'ja Wilson carried her team. 29 points, 9 of 18 from the field, 11 of 13 from the free throw line. On paper, that screams dominant performance. But dig deeper, and the cracks start to show. A'ja Wilson went to the line 13 times, just 4 fewer than the entire Indiana Fever team combined. She got every bailout, every soft whistle the refs could offer. And yet, none of it mattered. Because the rest of the Aces? They flat out disappeared. The team shot an abysmal 16% outside of Wilson. 7 for 43 from the floor. Let that sink in. 7 makes from an entire roster loaded with so-called stars. Chelsea Gray, the veteran playmaker? 2 points, 5 turnovers, completely overwhelmed by the Fever defense. The same Chelsea Gray that some people, with a straight face, have claimed is better than Caitlin Clark. Kelsey Plum? Nowhere to be found. The supposed depth of this championship team? Exposed. And the Fever? They didn't just lean on one player. They played real basketball. 24 assists on 31 made shots. That's unselfish, disciplined, championship-level execution. A'ja Wilson can score all she wants, but when your team shoots 16% and collapses under pressure, no amount of free throws can save you. The Fever weren't done sending their message, and what this game really revealed goes far beyond the scoreboard. You can call it momentum from the Commissioner's Cup. You can call it confidence. But here's the truth. The Fever's defense is no accident. For the first time in years, they look like a team that actually believes they belong. Switching on every screen, clogging passing lanes, rotating with precision. They didn't just survive the Aces' offense, they smothered it. Natasha Howard was flying around like a defensive anchor. Aaliyah Boston made the paint a no-go zone. The perimeter defenders? Aggressive, physical, and fearless. Even the rookies, players like Timpson, stepped in and looked like seasoned veterans. And this isn't one lucky game. The numbers back it up. Holding a powerhouse team like Vegas to 26% shooting, forcing 17 turnovers, that's the mark of a team that finally found its defensive identity. A'ja Wilson might be the league's favorite when it comes to getting calls, but the Fever proved that whistles alone don't win games. Wilson's 29 points look impressive until you realize how inflated those numbers really are. Over a third of her points came from the free throw line, gift wrapped by the officials. But when it came to real 5-on-5 basketball, the Fever made her life miserable. They clogged the lane, doubled at the right moments, and forced the Aces into bad shots. The officials tried to keep Vegas afloat, but even Whistle Wilson couldn't drag them across the finish line this time. Eventually, even favorable calls run out, and when they did, the Aces had no backup plan. The Aces needed a leader, someone to steady the ship, organize the offense, calm the storm. Instead, they got Chelsea Gray. Overwhelmed, hesitant, and completely ineffective. 2 points, 1 for 3 shooting, 5 turnovers. This is the same player some WNBA fans claimed was better than Caitlin Clark. Better than the rookie phenom who has electrified the league with her playmaking, shooting, and leadership. The Fever didn't have Caitlin on the floor, but Gray was so ineffective. It was like the Aces were down a player themselves. And without a floor general to guide them, the Aces imploded under the weight of their own mistakes. The camera kept cutting to her, injured, sidelined, unable to suit up. But Caitlin Clark wasn't checked out. She wasn't detached. She was fired up, animated, living every possession from the sidelines. That's the kind of leadership you can't fake. When your star player brings that much energy, it spreads. Her teammates fed off it. The crowd fed off it. Even the opposing bench could feel it. And compare that to Vegas, frustrated, bickering, pointing fingers. That's the difference between a team united and a team unraveling under pressure. Winning the Commissioner's Cup was supposed to be a confidence booster. But for the Fever, it flipped a switch. They didn't look satisfied. They looked hungry. Like a team that suddenly realized, we belong here. Their defense improved overnight. Their offensive execution became sharper. Their chemistry clicked. You could see it in how they rotated on defense, how they trusted each other to make the extra pass, how they refused to fold when the Aces tried to mount a comeback. That cup wasn't the finish line, it was the spark. For years, the narrative was set. The Aces were untouchable, the gold standard, the team everyone feared. But that's changing. This loss exposed more than a bad shooting night. It revealed chemistry issues, a reliance on A'ja Wilson to mask every flaw, a roster that suddenly looks top-heavy and shallow. They've lost their edge, their identity, their ability to dominate teams like they used to. The league is catching up, and the Fever just sent the clearest message, yet that Vegas time at the top is running out. This isn't the same Indiana Fever team that's been stuck at the bottom for nearly a decade. It's a new era. Young stars like Aaliyah Boston anchoring the paint. Veteran leaders like Kelsey Mitchell dropping clutch shots. Rookies stepping up. Bench players locking in defensively. And when Caitlin Clark returns, the ceiling gets even higher. The Fever are building something real. Chemistry, toughness, defense, and depth. They're no longer a team you circle on the schedule as an easy win. They're here, and they're not backing down. Sometimes the box score tells you everything. And in this case, it screams domination. The Fever shot nearly 53% from the field. Efficient, unselfish, relentless. The Aces, just 26%, their worst offensive output of the season. In the paint, Indiana dominated 38-20. On the glass, Fever controlled the boards. Turnovers, Aces gave it away 17 times. The stats don't lie. This wasn't close. This wasn't competitive. It was a systematic breakdown of the so-called dynasty. You could see it on their faces. By the third quarter, the Aces weren't just frustrated. They were defeated. The body language told the story. Slumped shoulders, missed assignments, forced shots. Even A'ja Wilson's usual fire faded as the realization set in. This wasn't their night. The Fever had come to play, and Vegas had no answers. It was written all over the sideline. The defending champs, unraveling on live television. Depth wins games, and the Fever's bench showed up when it mattered most. While Vegas leaned heavily on Wilson, Indiana got contributions everywhere. Role players hit timely shots. Bench defenders rotated seamlessly. Hustle plays, rebounds, smart fouls. All the little things championship teams rely on. It wasn't just the starters. It was a total team effort. A full roster, locked in, executing together. Vegas, outside of Wilson, they got next to nothing. For years, teams feared the Aces based on reputation alone. But the league is different now. The Fever just proved that names on a jersey don't win games. Rankings, MVP awards, media hype. None of that matters when the ball tips off. The Aces can't coast on past success. The blueprint for beating them is out there now. And teams like the Fever are ready to take advantage. The fear factor? Gone. One game can change everything, and this one did. The Indiana Fever exposed flaws, cracked the dynasty narrative, and announced themselves as real contenders. No Caitlin Clark. Questionable officiating. Years of history stacked against them. None of it mattered. The Fever dominated start to finish. The Aces fell apart. And now, every team in the WNBA has to ask the same question. Are the Aces still the standard? Or has the power shifted for good? Because the Fever? They're not going anywhere. Most players impact the game through stats, points, assists, rebounds. But then there's Caitlin Clark, changing the energy of an entire team, an entire arena, without even stepping onto the floor. It's rare to see. Clark wasn't in uniform. She wasn't hitting logo threes or threading passes through double teams. But her presence? It was undeniable. Every time the camera panned to the Fever bench, there she was, standing, clapping, hyping her teammates up like they were in the middle of a playoff series. No sulking, no frustration, just pure energy and leadership. That's the thing people don't always see in the highlight reels. Caitlin Clark isn't just a scorer. She's the emotional engine of this team. Even from the sidelines, her voice carried. You could see her pulling teammates aside, giving feedback, celebrating every defensive stop like it was a game winner. And that energy spreads. It's contagious. The Fever played with belief that they could dominate the supposed best team in the league. And a lot of that belief comes from the culture Clark brings. Her competitive fire, her refusal to settle, her accountability. It changes the way a team operates. Meanwhile, look at the other side. The Aces had no answer for the mental warfare happening off the court. Their star player, A'ja Wilson, was getting bailed out with free throws, but the team's chemistry? Completely fractured. The bench? Quiet. The communication? Breaking down. There was no vocal leader pulling them together. No one steadying the ship. That's the difference. Leadership isn't just about what you do when you're on the floor. It's what you bring when you can't play. Clark's leadership radiates beyond her minutes, beyond her stat line. Even sidelined, she's shaping this team's culture in real time. And when she comes back, with this version of the Fever already firing on all cylinders, the league better be ready. Because what Clark is building in Indiana isn't temporary. It's a new standard. At first glance, this looks like just another game on the WNBA schedule. But let's be clear, this wasn't a random regular season win. This was a calculated, brutal, season-altering message from the Indiana Fever to the rest of the league. For nearly a decade, the Fever were written off. They were the team you scheduled as a guaranteed win. 16 straight losses to the Las Vegas Aces. National analysts, fans, even other players considered them irrelevant. background noise to the championship contenders at the top. But this night, everything changed. The Fever didn't just beat the Aces, they humiliated them. A 27-point blowout, holding the defending champs to their lowest field goal percentage of the season, forcing them into bad shots, turnovers, mental mistakes. And they did it without their biggest star even stepping onto the floor. This wasn't a lucky shooting night. It wasn't about the Aces having an off game. The Fever dismantled every aspect of Vegas's game plan, offensively, defensively, mentally. And for a team like the Aces, built on reputation, hype, and the belief that they're untouchable, that type of blowout doesn't just sting. It shakes the foundation. It shows the entire league that the so-called hierarchy is vulnerable, that the dynasties aren't as bulletproof as people thought, that underdogs, when they play disciplined, fearless, team-first basketball, can embarrass even the most stacked rosters. More importantly, it gives teams like Indiana belief that they're no longer rebuilding. They're no longer bottom feeders. They're legitimate contenders ready to change the balance of power. This game wasn't about just one win. It was about proving that the new era of the WNBA has arrived. And at the center of that storm, the Indiana Fever. Vegas can cling to their past titles, their MVPs, their dynasty talk all they want. But after this blowout, they've been put on notice. The Fever didn't sneak away with a win. They made a statement with every possession, every defensive stop, every dagger from beyond the arc. This isn't the same Indiana Fever the league remembers. The rebuild is over. The message is clear. The future is now. For nearly a decade, the Indiana Fever were an afterthought, the team nobody feared, the easy win on the schedule. But not anymore. What they did to the Las Vegas Aces wasn't just a fluke. It was a statement, loud and clear. No Caitlin Clark? No problem. This team isn't built around one superstar. They've got depth, chemistry, toughness. All the ingredients championship teams are made of. Kelsey Mitchell dropping 25 points like it's nothing. Aaliyah Boston dominating both ends of the floor. Natasha Howard bullying the paint, making life miserable for the Aces frontcourt. Every player stepping up, every possession counted. And on the sidelines, Caitlin Clark might not have played, but her presence was everywhere. Cheering her teammates, leading vocally, keeping the energy high. That's real leadership, the kind that fuels a team beyond the stat sheet. Meanwhile, the Aces looked defeated, lost, a shell of the so-called dynasty everyone expected to run through the league. They leaned on whistles. They leaned on Asia Wilson. And when that didn't work, they had no answers. The Fever exposed the cracks, exposed the hype, exposed the myth that this league still belongs to Vegas. Because now, the hierarchy has changed. The Fever sent a message to every team watching. We're not backing down. We're not scared of reputations. We're not folding under pressure. And no amount of favorable calls is going to save you from real, disciplined team basketball. The WNBA just got a new reality check. The Fever have arrived, and they're not going anywhere.